Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Pash On Podcast. Let's get started with your host, Brian Pash.
Hi, this is Brian Pash, and welcome to another podcast interview. This one is in our series leading up to the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference in Austin, Texas this May. And one of my favorite topics and one of my favorite people in this industry, Atul Patel. He's the CEO and co-founder of Orbee. Today, we're talking about CDPs. Atul, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, as always. And I just want to mention all the work you've been doing around the CDP research report, and not even just the report, everything that's around it and the conversations you're having and the dialogue that you're almost a catalyst for. I mean, I see more LinkedIn posts literally about what it is you must be talking to everyone about that is even resulting in those posts. So we know where those posts are coming from. It's coming from your hard work.
Conversations have been amazing. And, it's funny, information sometimes seems to spread quickly and then other times slowly. And, one of the companies that are in the kind of corporate world of CDPs is a company owned by Twilio called Segment. I was never able to find somebody in the Automotive division. And lo and behold, this weekend, as I was talking about releasing the research report, one of my colleagues said, "Hey, man, you should talk to the people at Segment." It's a never-ending conversation. I was just talking to another colleague today, and they're like, "Hey, did you interview the folks at Epsilon?" I'm like, I had an open call to everyone, whoever wanted to participate. And so I think, Atul, as you know, there's many layers to this onion, and we're going to talk about this today. There's many different pieces that are going to be needed depending on the needs of the dealer group. And I thought it would be good we start with the basics. How does a dealer group get started? Who are the players? What are the use cases? Does that sound like a good topic for today's interview?
It does, because there's so many ways to skin this strategy, and it has to be pertinent to the actual dealer group's business model and strategic focus.
And so let me just put a very high level observation before we get started. The research report, 60 pages. It could have been 120 pages if I did a deep dive description on each platform's capabilities, but it would add months to the report. But here's one thing I do know, that dealers need to educate themselves on the questions that they need to ask. It's not clear to me that all sales presentations are being 100% transparent on what they can do or can't do, or what the word automation means. Does automation mean data is moved from one platform to other without a human involved, or is automation, hey, I can dump a file and you can load a file manually? These little nuances are so critical for dealers to understand. And today, hopefully, we can give a great framework to the dealers listening on how to get started. So, Atul, you've been really a leader in talking with large dealer groups about your platform, and you've been getting calls. NADA was busy for you. Now we're getting ready for DMSC. You're coming out to the Auto Intel Summit in Raleigh, North Carolina in April with me. Where should dealers start? If they're, let's just say 10 plus stores, 15 plus stores, hey, I would like to unify my customer data. Where's a good place to start?
All right. Well, that's a great question. So, it's interesting. There's a couple of things that when you think about even your own, personal, my own professional development, I can't simply say, I want to be successful, right? That doesn't really get me anywhere. It really has to be, what is the actual use case that we're trying to solve? And it's actually difficult to understand how a CDP or all of the data strategies apply to everyday problems. And that, I hope that your report sort of helps kind of inspire people that you can literally take any day-to-day scenario, strategy, business process, and apply a CDP mentality to it. So let's use one example. So if you're a large dealer group and you say, hey, look, I've been syndicating all of my used cars to each of the store's websites, right? So say I have 10 different brands, they're physically separate rooftops, but I'm going to go ahead and take this arsenal of used cars that I have in my database and I'm going to put it on each of them. So now all of a sudden, the dealer has, the same vehicle supposedly on 10 different lots, but we know that's not true. The consumer experience is to think that, hey, I could get any of these cars anywhere. And we want, as dealerships, to have the consumer perceive that you don't have to worry about where this car is. I'll get it to you. In fact, I heard from a large dealer group about how they've created these hubs where the actual used cars sit, and then they actually get the used car to the individual dealership within 19 minutes, right? So the consumer has no idea that car wasn't on the lot. But this is a perfect CDP use case, and that it's how you apply the use case to the CDP is where, Brian, all of your hard work, what PCG does as a professional services organization, saying, hey, what are you doing right now? And taking that specific case and saying, okay, now how does a CDP apply? So let's run through that, Brian. Can we do that for this used car initiative?
Sure.
All right. So in a CDP as a dealer group, obviously, this is probably the first time that a system or a capability, in this case, a CDP, has started from the ground up with the mentality of a cross-dealer group system, right? CRMs have started so long ago that they've evolved to actually support dealer groups, but they didn't start that way, right? But CDPs have the inherent advantage of saying, look, we're kind of a fresh concept. Let's make sure we have group mentality baked into the actual technology. And this is also why Orbee, at Orbee, we raised money from dealer groups. We collaborate deeply with dealer groups. We talk to dealer groups constantly and get a lot of feedback. And you've been doing that with CXO and other things as well. And so here's how you can apply a CDP to used car syndication. Well, number one, the journey can actually be connected across all of your rooftops. So where you normally saw it as individual stores and a customer journey in each one, you can actually tie in that journey across all of your rooftops. So Brian could have come to rooftop A, looked at a used car that's not even on the lot, and then all of a sudden, a few weeks later, he's on dealer B looking at another car. Well, wouldn't you want to use the journey data that's now stored in the CDP to say, hey, Brian, welcome back to our family of stores.
That's right.
Right? You were looking at this other used car, and hey, as a dealer, it's going to save you money on transport if you get Brian to look at that car again at the store that it's sitting at. And so these are the example use cases where you can actually think of your day-to-day business and apply it, and then get the support of vendors, partners, your existing, solutions providers to say, now, can I use a CDP to help me with this? And by the way, just in closing, it makes the financial and both the commitment financially and the commitment from a brain power standpoint worth it, because you're applying it to a real concept and not just a generic, I want to implement a CDP.
Right.
Mentality.
And when I talk to dealers, I tell them, look, you have to get a clear list of use cases together. You mentioned used cars. I'll bring up another one. Today, loyalty is an all-time low. Dealers need to defend their brand, their dealer group's advantage in the local marketplace. And so today, every dealer knows this. Somebody calls, if they have a BDC, that call can come into BDC. That BDC rep does not have any information at their fingertips to know if this is a very loyal customer, how many cars they've bought, how often do they service. And so a lead comes in and the CRM and, let's rush and call this person. There's no research. Or if somebody's inbound call. But in other places, when I call Delta or United, they recognize my phone number. If I'm flying that day, they say, is this about this flight? And imagine the difference in that first impression or ongoing communication when the call comes into the BDC and says, hi, ABC Ford, am I speaking with Mr. Pash? Oh, yes, you are. It's like, well, thank you for being a loyal customer. I see you've purchased multiple cars with us and service with us regularly. Just want to let you know, we appreciate your business. Now, how can I help
Incredible.
you? Like, that's a practical use case that dealers know that their CRMs are not capable, their DMSs are not capable. The CDP would know if they had an open recall. The CDP would know their preferred method of communication. The CDP would know what vehicles that they own or have recently traded. And yet we're using a blunt instrument to try to help customer loyalty. So let's say then,
well, real quick, Brian, I want to mention one thing.
Sure.
Your use case is powerful, and I think that it's an incredible opportunity for this industry. We see it all the time. I think what we just covered is dealer groups should think about all of the use cases. Don't spend hours and weeks and months around it, but certainly dream big, but act small. And cover the full gamut of where you can start and then where do you want to end up going. And when you tie it all together, you could actually knock out like a few birds with one stone when you implement this kind of strategy. So think big, act small, start with use cases that have immediate implications, and then also don't ignore that future vision that your dealer group has for that loyalty, that brand. So cover it all, I would say.
That's right. And I think that once the use cases are established, they're going to have to just pick the first, let's just say 2 to implement, right? It's kind of like that crawl, walk, run scenario. But here's one other thing, a tool that I'm not sure even after the research report is released, that the dealer group executives will have enough experience to know how to dream. Meaning, when I've asked a couple dealer group executives, give me a list of your 5 use cases for the CDP, they'll be like, I want to clean up my data. I want to eliminate duplicates. I want to segment, and when you look at the list, it's just what the CDP does. It's not about the activation, right? The CDP will combine all the data. It will dedupe. It will create segments. Now, the question is what to do with it. And this is where it gets a little tricky, because without having all the players at the table, I'm suggesting that obviously someone from marketing, someone from operations, someone from the tech team, and then someone from the executive team. I think how do we get started? We got to have the people who understand the pain points in the organization, and with the idea of what could unified, deduped, segmented data do for our business. Do you agree?
I agree with that. Yes. Increasingly, we are seeing that the most successful conversations around this topic are the ones when the CTO, CIO, head of tech, and the CMO, the director of marketing, are all in the room together. And in many cases, you have this sort of the visit from the key executives that are, the CEOs, the owners, the principals of these dealer groups, because everyone is curious, right? But it takes all of the parties to come together and not have to wait to have a vision in one area and then say, yeah, but we'll have to see about that. I know tech is working on something. That's the worst, right? I hate that statement, which is, I think the other department is working on something. We'll have to check on that. It's like, well, how about we just let's all be in the same room together and figure out the use cases that actually apply to both departments, right? Because the tech person is figuring out how to centralize data, where to store their data lake. Is it going to be on-prem or in the cloud? You've got these DMSs and CRMs opening up their data feeds more aggressively. You've got, hey, I've got all this data that I've been updating daily through a batch process that I coded 5 years ago. How does this apply? We were on a call with a very large dealer group yesterday, and they were talking about the amount of data manipulation that comes after pulling the data from, say, Reynolds. And there is no way that Orbee should ever go straight to Reynolds for them, because they do so much ETL, right? Extract, transform, load, so much manipulation. The manipulation sounds like a bad word, but it's really not. It's like they clean, they organize, they remap so much data that it's better that our system come from their replica, not from Reynolds. So if the tech person, and by the way, on that call was only the tech people. And on a previous call to that last week was only the marketing people. So increasingly, what I would want to do with you, Brian, is we should actually come up with a workshop toolkit on how to get everyone in your department, how to get a tech person, how to get a marketing person who maybe rarely talk together, right? And to get them into a room and here's some questions, here's some whiteboarding exercises. And we should actually just pick a few groups and force that, because I think it's almost like it's an inspirational moment, I feel, when the tech team and the marketing team and the executives and the analysts, the data analysts, all start to realize that we have more in common than we ever thought.
You bring up a good point about some of the larger groups have already realized the limitations of accessing the DMS and created their own data lakes, data warehouses, where existing business tools, oftentimes operational or financial tools, are created. And so a CDP is really the next evolution in that. As I've been trying to understand the different operational frameworks for CDPs, here's another piece of why the tech folks have to be involved. Some of the larger CDPs that are outside of automotive who are coming in, the Salesforce, the Telium, the Treasure Data, and such, their pricing models based on the number of transactions that are happening on an annual basis. And, the average marketing manager doesn't know, hey, how many records are in the DMS? How many new ones get added a year? How many service ROs historically are there, and how many are in a year? So even things like how many pieces of mail go out, how many inbound or outbound phone calls do we make? There's some very interesting pricing models. And in order to really understand the scope of the initial build, what professional services are going to be needed, we need to have the tech folks there to tell us, hey, are all the phone switches the same? Are all the DMSs the same? Are all the CRMs the same? This is really an opportunity, you're right, Atul, to put almost a workflow document together on what to gather before you meet, what should be decided at the meetings, and maybe even list some use cases where they can prioritize it.
I love that. Yeah. So sample use cases. Why is it that these podcasts become sessions for us to do more work? Okay. So use cases, the questions to come into the meeting and what to expect to leave. I love that a lot. And I think that dealer groups need to kind of do this independent of a vendor. And this is me. I'm at Orbee, right? I'm saying that it should actually happen before. Now, if everyone needs to sort of jog their thinking by talking to a trusted vendor or, Brian, I think that's important. That gives a starting sort of roadmap of where to begin, where should we lean. But it's important to not let that conversation bias or influence, right? It should be based on real use case. I would just simply say it's imperative from a future state of this automotive industry that these types of technologies be applied. So no one could ever say, yeah, we just don't have any use cases. That does not count. No one gets to go into the room or leave that room with the idea that, yeah, we don't really need this. But what I will say is it doesn't need to be artificially influenced by the technology providers themselves, because I try to go into conversations later in the process than earlier. And I actually find that it's more fulfilling after they've spoken to other companies or other people. And in fact, yesterday, or it was last week, I kept saying yesterday, but last week, there was a woman that at a large dealer group that asked me very, very specific questions. And I said, hey, before I answer, where did all this even come from? I mean, are you from outside the industry? Were you reading? And she said she's been reading a lot of material, talking to a lot of people. And I think that's what's important is when you come into these conversations, come into these sort of workshops internally at your organization, do it with some information, do it with Brian Pash's report. Don't talk to too many vendors. Start from scratch and say, what are the things that would apply to this? And then say, okay, now I'm going to go seek out which vendors could help me do this. And, and I think that's how I would approach it.
Yeah. And it's wise advice because, the use cases will also determine how much investment in professional services are needed. And let's talk about that. For the dealers who are listening, let me just say that a true CDP, if we just look at the CDP's function, is to organize, secure, unify data, and to continually update those records based on transactional or engagement data to build proper segments of customers that then can be activated through personal communication or marketing. And when it comes to personal communication, let me just say that I believe that dealers will have the largest financial return, like significantly increased revenue and customer loyalty and LTV, lifetime value, on the personalized communication, personalized experience, because hey, once you clean up your data, the marketing, you won't be marketing to duplicates, you won't be mailing to duplicates. All of that is kind of table stakes with any unified database. But the really cool stuff is, are you connecting in with an Impel Sales AI or a Connect AI to do one-on-one personalized texting contextual, or are you using digital voice assistants to start an outbound call about a recall without forcing your human staff to do it? Or are you personalizing the web experience based on their last shopping or pre-fill forms? These are the things that are like revenue generators, wow factors. But guess what? Those things typically are the cutting edge stuff that's going on, and someone is going to have to manage the project, test the implementation, make sure things are working right. And so, Atul, let's talk about that. I think dealers are willing to pay for the wow experience. The vendor community just has to unite and say, look, we need to be more flexible to find solutions partners, additional resources to help, in your case, for example, Orbee, to solve more problems. I can't do it myself. I got to build a support network.
Yeah. So professional services, you're nailing a very important concept outside of, when you think about Salesforce. I was just looking it up. Around 10% of their revenue is actually professional services. And I've actually built a lot of software companies in the past, and I've actually consulted. I've pulled together teams, helped other people build tech. So I actually find that this is a very exciting opportunity for Orbee to provide additional support, right? Because dealers have once you nail the use case by involving everyone within your organization, all the critical people in tech and marketing, et cetera, you now have sometimes a very specific demand of these platforms. And not all of the platforms have all the pieces. It's not out of the box. I mean, certainly some things are. We could get up and running with the base CDP rather quickly. But once you start thinking about, like you said, Brian, like, how does this work with my other system? Or how am I going to create my own unified ID number? Or here's a vision I have around how I'm going to create a VIP program for my loyal customers. That's when you have to sort of start to say, okay, can you, vendor, provide me services that could extend what it is you're offering and do it in such a way that it supports one of three scenarios. One, it's truly custom. It's likely never going to be resellable to anybody else. In fact, in the statement of work might be the notion of it being work for hire, meaning the actual IP is owned by the dealer group, right? When you pay somebody to build you software, you could define in the contract who owns it. So that's number one. Truly custom, you charge me per hour and you build it because I can't extend my staff. I've got to focus on other things. I'm buying 20 rooftops next month. I don't want to hire more people in the development side of my house. So that's number one. Number two, on the other end of the spectrum is, okay, can you productize this? So Orbee takes a very productization mentality. And, there's been talks in the industry on like, why does Orbee like take on some of this other work? And I feel like it's important for our clients, for our dealer groups to support them, right? Because I'm not going to just sell a widget and expect them to go out and
figure out all the integrations.
Right. So even our work with, say, Honda and the new deployment we're doing for Acura with the tag management system, we go to all these vendors and have not forced ourselves onto them, but actually said, hey, Carnell, let's think of a better way to implement scripts so that for the next 100 scripts we need to turn on for dealer groups or OEMs or whoever, why don't we make it a kind of a single bootloader? So we started working with everybody and customizing that, but we didn't charge anyone for it because to us, we see it as our productization. It's almost as though the roadmap of Orbee's is defined by the market. And it's exciting. It's a great place to be. But then, Brian, the final scenario is, okay, so you need it now, dealer group, but I can envision productizing this in the future, right? It's not easy to go from one dealer's use case and go tell it to another 100 and say, you should also do this. Because we just said at the beginning of this podcast, every dealer group has their own use cases and should not be influenced by others. But imagine if Orbee's creating this concept called working groups. And working groups is very popular in the internet tech body. It's called W3C, where people get together and say, hey, what problems are we going to all solve together? So we're creating effectively working groups where if one dealer says, I want to take the ops codes of all of my dealers and map them to a single op code so that a 30,000 oil change has the same code in the central database. And then I want to create a unified marketing capability that kind of finds kind of defective, decline services, right? These are the people that declined a red or yellow service. But since I have 30 rooftops, how am I going to do that when every dealer group and every OEM has a different opcodes for the same service? Well, that's an example where maybe the dealer group needs it now, and Orbee's going to provide the professional services and bill for those hours to do that mapping. But I already envisioned, wait a second, this could actually be productized. So how Orbee applies is we'll discount the professional services, or you got to love this. So we're doing this amazing project with the dealer group out in Buffalo, New York, and we're building them API integrations to, trade-in tools and inspection services so they can launch their own used car kind of ingestion, their own used car acquisition program, so that they don't have to be reliant on an iframe to Kelly Blue Book and whatnot.
Smart.
We're doing these API integrations, and you know what? I still had to bill for it, but I said, I have an idea. If you go to your 20 groups and talk about how exciting this is, and they come and use this feature that we've already built for you, I will pay you back. And
Love that.
so professional services is a big area that must be talked about. And everyone's going to say, yes, yes, yes. Of course, I'll do it. But you have to make sure that that company has the experience of scaling up staff quickly. How do they retain that staff? How do they have project management around it?
Yep.
And that flexibility must be baked in, because as much as we all of us vendors, me included, want to sell that we have all these pieces, it's never that easy. And you need to make sure that you have that option there.
Well, I think today we really covered some important topics, and let me just do a recap. Dealers, you have many choices out on the marketplace, and it's not easy for you to determine who the best partner is. So instead of just booking demos, how about getting your operations people together, your marketing people, your BDC folks together, your tech infrastructure folks, and the executive team, and list out potential use cases for unified data that would improve the customer experience, that would reduce marketing costs, would make one-to-one communication possible. Then rank them on how they would impact the business, and then maybe start to gather some of the data, like what's the DMS at every store, the CRM at every store, what's the volume of data that we have, and such. Really do your homework. Who's our telephony platforms? Who's our chat platforms? Who's our digital retailing platforms? And then once you have a clear idea, then as you start to interview, you can show the expected use cases. You can talk about timelines. You could talk about professional services. All of these questions should be clearly answered. And if you have a vendor who's not transparent, cannot talk about how they do things, or don't have use cases that have been customized that they can point to, just be careful, because what you don't want to do is get 6 months into a CDP project and find out that the company really can't prioritize your custom development. And now you've sunk 6 months into a project and you have a year to wait for some of those key use cases to be activated.
Brian, just on that note, that was perfectly well said there. And I'd say the thing that excites me the most is when dealer groups, after hearing all of this stuff and doing all those exercises you're talking about, they come back and say, I finally get it. So here's what I want to do. When they say that, they got their finger on their chin. They're like, so here's what I want to do. I want to, and usually it's something completely different, but right. The ingredients are the same.
Yes.
Yes. It's like, no, you don't have to have pasta. We can just use the sauce and we could actually change the cuisine or not the cuisine, but the dish, but it's the same raw ingredients. And I know you got lots of homes in Italy. I saw your recent post. So I think that's why pasta came to mind.
Yeah. Well, listen, Italian food is always on my mind. And you're absolutely right. For each dealer group, the recipe is going to be different, but it's going to be based on, I believe, we should be focused on how could we improve the customer experience that the customer would value, not us. Like, what could we do that would really make the customer experience better? The customer would recognize it, that it would build more brand equity, and of course, help you operate more efficiently. These are the general goals. And I want to encourage everyone who's listening to today's podcast to do two things. Number one, go to pashgroup.com, our new rebranding of our consulting and research services, and download the CDP research report. It's called The Rise of CDPs in Automotive Retail. And I want you to pass it around to your key executives, your operations teams, your tech teams, and plan a conversation on what use cases would really be possible that would change the customer experience. And then number two, I want you to come out to the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference, May 21, 22, 23, because we are pulling together leaders in data management, data penning, identity resolution. We have folks that serve the larger Fortune 5,000 community to automotive specific companies. And we're going to have the largest forum for discussion on first party data management, identity resolution through CDPs and MAPs. Of course, there's other topics. We're going to be talking about the use of artificial intelligence. And of course, that plays directly into the data activation piece and data updating without being limited by the clock or labor forces. We're going to be talking about marketing automation. Once the data is all clean, how do we use it to reach more people or find more people like our customers? All of these will be talked about at the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference. So you can just go to digitalmarketingstrategies.org. And just keep in mind, we added a bonus day dedicated for GA4 for only $95. You can add that extra day, and we're going to have a full hands-on session for GA4. Remember that in July of this year, 2023, the data feeds for GA3 will stop, and it's extremely important that your team has the skills, the expertise. We're going to be literally inspecting every dealer's account who's in that class to make sure that they're all set up. This is going to be a great, great show. And after 10 years in Napa, we're bringing it to Austin, Texas. Cheaper air flights, cheaper hotel, more access for more people. This conference will sell out, so don't miss it. Atul, Orbee has been in the news. You've announced a number of data partnerships, including the recent one with Cognition on Amazon advertising. There's so much to catch up on. Where can dealers go to learn about your platform, get a demo? Because honestly, each month the partnerships are growing. So if somebody interviewed you a year ago, it's a completely enhanced product line. What's the best website for them to go to?
It's interesting you say that. Even our own team goes to Orbee.com. We're doing so much with so many people, and the movement, just the momentum that we're seeing around integrations, features. We're trying to be the most transparent, open company, even down to some new capability we added. And so our website, Orbee.com, is a massive resource. We are adding more and more capability, more and more information there. We just added an entire knowledge base. We added product updates, which will go down to small things that you would say, wait, they just added that. And I told my team, hey, it's okay. We still need to tell the industry how quickly we deploy features and capabilities that, by the way, based on what we just talked about today, is driven by all of you in this industry. So we are here at your service. We try to give you guys more information so you can sort of get you thinking outside the box. So go to our website, read about it. Don't think you have to leave the website knowing, having a clear idea. It's just ways to plant seeds of ideas so that you can go back internally and say, I think we could rethink this or that. And definitely fill out the form, reach out to myself. Happy to be part of the dialogue in the early days. And we have dealer groups that we've been talking to sometimes for a year plus, and they haven't moved on anything, but we value every single one of those interactions.
Well, I would state that out of all the companies that I've been interviewing, you've been a tremendous resource on really the nitty-gritty to make this upcoming research report as accurate and actionable as possible. So thank you, Atul. For those of you who are listening to this podcast for the first time, you should know that I interviewed dozens of automotive leaders, executives, innovators, and disruptors. And so you can just go to brianpash.libsyn, that's libsyn.com, or just go to your Google Play or Apple Podcast channel and search for Brian Pash Podcast. We have a whole series leading up to the Digital Marketing Strategies Conference. It's a great way to learn about the leaders that will be speaking at the conference and showcasing their latest innovations for automotive retail. And I want to encourage you, if the CDP story is important to you, make sure you subscribe to my LinkedIn newsletter. You can just go to my LinkedIn profile. You can follow me and then click on the subscribe link to the newsletter. And one last thing, in the fall, we plan to release our new online digital course. It's going to be a CDP certification course for dealership managers. It's going to cover things like first-party data management, data appending, identity resolution, all the things that I think we need to invest in to just educate the next generation of automotive leaders. Just like we have courses on digital marketing, lead handling, leadership, we're going to add this first-party data management course. So look for that in the fall. In the meantime, get your tickets for DMSC, that's digitalmarketingstrategies.org, and please bring multiple members of your team, because it's going to take multiple leaders to execute a successful first-party data management and activation strategy. Thanks, everyone, for listening. Thank you, Atul, and I'll catch you next time on another podcast interview.